You're watching the press preview. It's the first look at what is on tomorrow's front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines tonight with Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the Spectator's deputy editor Freddy Gray. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's check out some of those front pages. And on the second day of the invasion in Ukraine, the Financial Times declares Russian forces descend on Kiev, picturing Ukrainian soldiers lying on their stomachs with guns drawn in the capital. The Telegraph reports on the battle for Kiev. The Eye has a nearly identical photo and headline. Similarly, here's the Times, battle to save Kiev. The Mail calls Kiev the city of courage. The Guardian describes the city as being on the brink. Referencing the Ukrainian flag, The Sun calls the conflict zone the thin blue and yellow line, while the Mirror shares the Ukrainian President Zelensky's message of hope. We are not afraid, he said today, and a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch and listen to what our reviewers have to say. And I'm joined now by Susie Boniface and Freddy Gray. Thank you for your patience as we just listened in to developments in New York there. Let's start, Susie, perhaps with you. What's interesting is that pretty much all the front pages have a very similar headline, but most of them are carrying this photograph of Ukrainian troops on their bellies on this motorway bridge, a crucial bridge into Kiev, doing their best to protect their city.
Yeah, and so here we are on day 2 of the Russian invasion, and it's not quite going according to plan. So on day 2, if you were the superpower that Russia thinks it is and thinks it should still be, you should really have landed a city by now. You should have taken over a major centre of population, and they haven't managed that. They're still on the outskirts of Kiev. Hopefully they're going to be there for a bit longer yet. Now, they are expected that they have enough force on the Russian side to roll in at some point, but UK intelligence was saying yesterday that the day 1 objectives had not been met. The Ukrainian authorities, and there's no verification for this, are saying that they've killed or wounded about 3,000 Russian troops while losing a few hundred of their own. We do know that about 18,000 submachine guns have been handed out to Ukrainian citizens to use on any passing Russian soldiers that they might see. And we also know that 200 missiles have rained down on Ukraine from Russia. And that's actually, although, you know, any one missile in your back garden is one too many, but 200 is not a lot. There were more than 500 on the first opening night of, if anyone remembers, the George Bush's shock and awe first war on Baghdad back in 2003. So 200 missiles is not anywhere near as many as Putin could unleash if he wanted to. And so we're not quite sure, really, although, you know, Kiev is plainly digging in and they are out for a fight, and they are going to give Putin far more trouble than he was expecting, perhaps. And maybe that's what slowed things down a bit and given him some pause for thought. But he's definitely not unleashed what he could unleash.
Yeah. Freddie, let's look at the front of The Guardian, one of the few papers, actually, that hasn't gone with that picture of the troops. Instead, it's got a picture of a young boy looking out of a train, crowds of people trying to get onto trains today at Kiev railway station to get out, to be evacuated from this city. And, of course, we're all fearing a huge civilian death toll. And what struck me today, looking at a lot of the footage, was just how like footage from World War II it was. People desperately clamouring to get onto trains or cowering in basements.
It really is. I don't often like to commend The Guardian, but I think actually their picture's a much better picture choice because it speaks to this refugee, this human crisis we're facing. And while I'm all in favour of papers sort of rallying behind the Ukrainians, and I think Susie makes some good points, you know, I think that the sadness is the overwhelming air power and potential increased troop enforcements that Russia can send in at this stage is terrifying. And while we all want the Ukrainians to show a good fight and all that, I think we need to be realistic about the fact that they are being overwhelmed. I think it will be a fight, and I think it's actually awful that it's going to be a fight in some ways, because that will mean the death of more young men on both sides.
Freddie, Susie, I know you're going to stay with us all evening. Don't go away. Just want to read you something that President Zelensky has issued on a video in the last few moments. It's quite a long statement, but this is the gist of it. He says, "This night will be harder than the day. Special attention is paid to Kiev. You can't lose the capital," he told his people tonight. He said, "This night, the enemy will use all its forces to break our resistance. Vile, cruel and inhuman. Tonight, they will storm." The president speaking to the people of Ukraine in the